Hello and welcome back. We're working on OAuthServer.net. We've completed the main functionality for the OAuth server, and what we need now is we need to have a separate UI project, which is unauthenticated, for modifying the clients and any of the properties inside of the app. The goal for this is that we're going to have a Docker container at the end, or a Docker image, that you're going to be able to download from Docker Hub and spin up the OAuthServer.net, just change the connection string in the environmental variables. And then we'll have the second project, this UI project, which is what you'll use to configure the server. It's going to be unauthenticated, and then you just destroy the instance when completed. So let's go ahead and add a new project in here. Actually, before I do that, I want to show the last changes that I made on the project, which are that if we look at the controllers in here, you can see everything has been very well cleaned up. And what I've implemented is this thing called a BLL. So for example, we have one for authorize endpoint, one for token endpoint, one for login endpoint. And it just wraps these calls for me. We essentially load up this object here, and then we have a couple of validations which we can call. And some of this logic is redundant, like the isGrantValid, and we'll put those into a base class. But for now, I think we're going to jump over. So if I look at my login controller, you can see this one's been very much cleaned up as well. And we have our external logins working, pulled from the identity system. And if we look at the token controller, we have individual types here by grant type. We've created grant type as an object in the database. So if you wanted to register an additional grant type or remove one, you can do it from here in the context. And these we have not in the validator. We do have the functions in the validator because there's this one grant type called refresh token, which actually doesn't have a grant type. So we need to have it a little bit specific. On that note, let's create our UI. So we're going to add a new project. And I'm going to call it a ASP.NET Core Web Application. And I'll put it right here. And I want to call it OAuthServer.net.UI. Just a second. Let me close this. Look at that project here. I look at the I want to get rid of this one. There we go. Okay, let's add that web UI project now. Add a new project. Web application. OAuth server.net.ui. Okay, so I have a couple of different types in here. I wonder, we could try this. I've never made an Angular app built in, but we don't want authentication. It's not going to let me set the Angular app for Docker. But let's just see what this looks like first. So did this bootstrap it? It looks like it did. So when I run this UI now, we should have a back end and a front end. And here we go, client app distribution. That's the root path. And my controller is going to the, I think it's @/client app. So let's give it a run. This is restoring with NPM, right? It'll take just a minute. While we wait for this, we're going to look at the app component. Okay, that looks good, and it should have these are my pre-created components. I don't see any styling. Just this style CSS. I don't see it using SCSS or anything. So let this finish up here. And this is my new single page application. And if I look at the home, welcome to your new single page application, hello world. So it is here. You have a fetch data component and a counter component. Now the routes are probably not going to work. Cool. And that looks great. So if I look at my fetchdata.html, this looks good. So I'm going to open this folder up in code, and I'm going to close this project. And now if I delete everything in the client app folder, give it just a second. What is open here? If this doesn't take, I'll just scaffold it into a different directory. There we go. I think Angular is only suitable for admin page. That's exactly what I'm using it for. This is for the UI in order to okay, let's just scaffold it into a new directory. So let's make a directory in here called WebApp. And then I want to do a ng. Oh God, what was it called? We want to look at my tour of heroes. ng new, and we want to call it OAuth server, just like that. And we want to set up routing, and we want to use SCSS. Give it just a second here. And everything is up now. So now we can go back into the app. And we can take everything in here and move it to the root folder. And then get rid of this OAuth server. And then we can open up our project again. Okay, we're going to leave client app alone for now. And instead I want to look at WebApp. So I'm going to look everywhere for where it says client app. And I wonder if I can delete some stuff in client app called. Well, not yet. Okay, so now what I want to do is look at my startup. And we want to use WebApp/dist. Source path is in WebApp. And when it starts, it's going to run npm start. So let's run it. And here we are. And now we can see that it's running the correct path. So what I want to do is now in code, we're going to open this up. And what I want to do is I want to start scaffolding in some components. So the first thing I want to add in here is a HTTP client module, which is a import HTTP client module from, and it's at Angular common. HTTP. Okay, and then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to have a service, ng generate service, and I want to call it app services, and we want to call it HTTP service. Okay, let's delete that and do it again. It doesn't need to go into the app folder. And so now in my service, what I want to do is we're going to create the first call to the API. So I'm going to make a new controller in here. And I want to call it a API controller. And I'm going to call it a client's controller. Now I can add a reference real quick. What is this in? This is 3.1, right? Yeah. I can add a reference to a project called the OAuth.net. Now that's actually going to bring in all the controllers and everything for the authorize endpoint. So I'm not sure if we want this in the end. We may just want to have this thing separated into another. I'm just thinking out loud. And so if I look at my web app, under here, I want to grab my connection strings and bring that in. There we go. I was like, that's tripping me out. Okay. And we want it to be in the same database, OAuthServer.net. And now if I look in here, I should have a data access layer right there. And so I should be able to do a constructor, and we're going to inject the OAuth server data access layer, called data access layer. And then in here, I need to register it as the startup. So if I look at this one, up here, I want to register a services.add transient of an OAuth server data access layer and an OAuth server data access layer. And that should only be dependent on the context, which we can grab from here. Use SQL Server comes from an extension in Microsoft.entityFrameworkCore.SQL Server. Okay. And so now what I can do is I can have a HTTP GET, and I want to be a public virtual asynchronous task called get async. And I want this to be a route to be, it doesn't matter because this is just going to be this controller like that. And in this, I just want to do await data access layer dot get clients asynchronous. Like that. And we need to have an application user for which clients this is registered to. But I don't know if that's right. Because if I look at the models, I don't think an application user owns clients. I think clients just exist. Like that. Which means in your services where you're creating these, you can get rid of this. Like that. And this needs to return a action result. And this is going to be an OK of get clients. I want to add in here in the startup, just like we have over here, this add middleware underneath routing. Okay. And that's it. That's all this is going to have, right? If I was to rebuild this, hey, Nar, I'm doing great. How are you doing? Looks like I don't see you using non-SQL ever. I do use non-SQL. I use Mongo for quite a few things. I could use Mongo for this one. I'm just using SQL because I'm using any framework and it's just easier to get it all implemented. But we could have just easily done this with SQL or with Mongo. Those are my two that I go to. We could have used Mongo or we could have used Postgre. So now we need to fix these, which are here, 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 and here. And then that should be it. Dapper can work with MongoDB. No, Dapper still works with SQL. It could work with Mongo. From what Keith told me yesterday, because it's just built on a connection string with Mongo, you can connect entity to Mongo, and you can probably also connect Dapper. It's just a ODBC connection, right? And now over here, we can fix this by getting rid of the application user ID afterwards. I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. No problem. Glad you're here hanging out with us today. Okay, so now that that worked, I can set this as a startup project. I can delete my database, do a add migration called init in my output directory of data migrations. Yes, OpenDJ Radio, that's still available. And now we can do a update database. Forgot to delete the database. Yep, no turning back game. I know that the purchases in it right now are not working correctly through Google, so I need to correct that this weekend. And I'm deleting the database here. And then we're going to do an update database again. Okay, now that that's done, I'm just thinking out loud, just a second. I just feel like I'm going to need a copy of the data access layer, which sucks, but I think that's what's going to have to happen. So that's done. So now when I run the web app, everything should scaffold and build. And now in our clients controller, we want to get. So let's do a new file in here, and I want to call it a models.ts. And then I also want to have a, and I'm just using this for reference, I think it's another full file called index.ts or something like that. Yep. And so in my index.ts, I want to do a export everything from my and you're doing it for each of the modules and then your indexes. So we just want to do services HTTP service. And now in here, I want to do a ng generate component called clients. I am working from home right now, yes. So here's our new clients component. So in my index, I want to do a export everything from clients client component. And in my model, I want to have a interface called iBase interface. And if I look at this one, we want to have a ID, which is a string. I don't care about the timestamp. And then we have a grant ID, so we'll worry about that in a minute. It's actually just a full grant type. We have a client name. We have a client ID. a client secret, a token expiration in minutes, a issue refresh tokens, a refresh token expiration in days, is that Angular front end? Yep. We're adding an Angular front end, and it's just built right into a ASP.NET app. So it's all one project. I see their boilerplate service, ABP, is taken from the Swagger. I don't know what you're talking about there, Guy. Tell me a little bit more what you mean. We want to have the issuer URI, which is a string. We want to have an audience, which is a string. A allow remember login, which is a boolean. A enable local login, which is a boolean. A enable external login, which is a boolean. A validate issuer, which is a boolean. A validate audience, which is a boolean. A validate issuer signing key, which is a boolean. And then finally is a validate course, which is a boolean. And we want to make another interface called interface iClient extends iBase interface, like that. Yeah, we're going to put NGRX in just a moment. Oh, yeah. This is exactly what this is it's a boilerplate for ASP.NET so that it includes Angular. I've actually never worked with it tightly coupled like this before. Okay. So I think we're ready to put NGRX in this, right? First, let's go into our service for HTTP client. Let's just make it get something first. So in this, I want to have a private HTTP client called HTTP client. And I want to do a request clients. We're going to do a this.http client, and we want to get a number of these iClient, and I want to get it from the URI, and we want to say /clients. And then we want to subscribe to the clients like that. So now if my clients exist, then I want to do a, and right now we're just going to do it with a subscription. So I'm going to say a client subscription, call it a subscription. And it's a this dot, I'm sorry, this is a subject of iClient array. And I want to do a this dot and then we're going to do a this dot client subscription dot next of my clients. Okay, now this is not using NGRX at the moment. We're just going to check this. So in here, we're going to inject the private HTTP service called HTTP service. And I just want to do this dot HTTP service dot client subscription dot subscribe. And I can add up here a client's subscription, which is a subscription. And I want to subscribe my clients. And then we also want to have a on destroy. So it's a ng on destroy. This dot my client subscription dot unsubscribe. And all I want to have up here is my clients called iClient array. And then in here, all I want to do is we want to make a table. And I want to make a table row, and it's going to be an ng4 equals, and it's a let client of clients. And all I want to do here is have a table definition of and we're just going to do client.client name and then the client.client ID and then the client.client secret. Let's see if this works. So this is the OAuth app that got started, but we only want the UI app to be the one to start. So I forgot to, in the clients, call this dot HTTP service dot request clients. Now, I don't think it's automatically updating like this, is it? I was to come in here and do oh, but it's never routing me there, so I need to look at my routes. And I want to add in a new route here. And this one's going to go from second. Like that. We want to say my path is nothing. My component is a client's component. And we want to say that's it. Client works. And there it is. So it loaded everything and it successfully hit the API. And there it is. So in the application itself now, I can look at my app component.html. I can scrap everything but the router outlet. And now what I want to do is we can get rid of this. I want to say that div class equals a mobile nav container. And then I want to have a span. And then here I want to say I have a button. And then we're not using Angular material, but we can. So we'll just add it in. Nav bar element. And my router link is going to go to nowhere, like that. And I want to say my button here is going to say clients. Okay. When I look at my styling on this, let's start with that. Jump over here, and you can see everything is working.